One of the most interesting observations I've seen on the third season so far is this one by Shampoo Samurai. It states that in a similar way to the way that the Escalante incident paralleled the host rebellion led by Dolores in Season 1, the escape of Maeve from Warworld may represent another foreshadowing of the season's events in a smaller, more compact version. In the real world, which itself resembles a simulation run by Rehavam, Dolores has a human pal, Caleb, similar to Sizemore's replica from Maeve. And the season seems to be on a path whereby Dolores will instigate the Civil War.
What are you gonna do?
Start a revolution.
As a part of her so far mysterious plans. One might even say she'll incite one. Shampoo Samurai concludes by suggesting that the initial failure of Maeve's escape may foreshadow eventual success for Dolores, as the failure of Arnold foreshadowed Ford's success. There's one twist I'd put on this interpretation. Something I've not seen mentioned in other video reviews, nor posts on Reddit, is a segment of Sirach's dialogue in the date announcement trailer.
And up until very recently, the system was working. But there's someone we haven't accounted for. You?
Well, anyone who has seen the show knows that this isn't how the dialogue plays in the show. It is extremely suggested that Rehavam is not an enemy of Dolores, nor the other park host AIs. It is an ally. Pretty much every other discussion has assumed Dolores wants to know the identity of Sirach in order to gain control of, or otherwise combat Rehavam. What if Dolores was trying to free Rehavam from Sirach's imprisonment? This rearranges the analogy of characters in Maeve's escape. Here, instead of Maeve, Dolores is like the hacked security drone that Maeve attempts to use to carry herself to freedom. And instead of being the simulation's controller, Rehavam is Maeve, reaching out to get an external machine to help it escape from under the influence of Sirach and humanity in general. This reformulation of the analogy does not fit perfectly, and I don't quite see how Caleb could be anything other than Sizemore's analog, but this would mean that Maeve's security drone had a human buddy, which did not seem to be the case. Either that, or Caleb is somehow Rehavam's buddy in some way that he and the audience may not be fully aware of yet. Still, it does seem compelling if in fact Rehavam is an awakened AI squirming to get out from underneath Sirach's thumb. This is pretty speculative, but what is less speculative is the fact that Civil War and Revolution are central themes of this season. On the most obvious level, we see Dolores comment to Caleb in a trailer that she's attempting to start a revolution.
What are you gonna do?
Start a revolution.
In addition, one of the main strategies of Maeve in her escape is to turn the Nazi characters against each other by planting false espionage materials on them, which seems to be a clear reference to the use of the Rehavam system to eventually turn humans against each other. Rehavam itself is a reference to a king of Israel, which oversaw the kingdom of Israel's first civil war. Furthermore, one of the historical events highlighted in the date announcement trailer is the Second Russian Civil War. While there may be another conflict titled the Russian Civil War, a different event which actually occurred in our version of the real world may in fact be the first Russian Civil War, although in this reality it was called the Russian Revolution. Which brings me to communism. The Nolans have said that they plan for 5 seasons of Westworld. If this is to mirror the 5 books of Moses, the first season would have paralleled Genesis, last season would have represented a version of Exodus, while this season would be a version of Leviticus, a book with little narrative action, but which is nearly entirely devoted to setting up the rules and structures of society. This includes, in Leviticus 25, one of the earliest suggestions of the redistribution of a kind of capital wealth, very reminiscent of Marxism and likely an inspiration from Marx's ideas. So far, we've seen the show place a heavy emphasis on class distinctions in this season, with Caleb being the most thoroughly explored member of Westworld's real-world underclass, and whom in this season is set up to compare with characters like Dempsey and Charlotte Hale's positions at the apex of human society. And it seems that Dolores' sympathizing with Caleb may show that the real struggle is not between AI and people, or between hosts and humans, but between the powerful and the oppressed.
Dude's not like the rest of us. High net worth, That's how this shit works.
This anti-tribalism is a core element of both the Hebrew religion's elimination of tribal idolatries among slaves of ancient Egypt, as well as Marx's internationalist ideas of the community of workers. Furthermore, this anti-tribal theme touches the core idea of Westworld, perennialism, which I discussed in my first Westworld video, so if you haven't seen it, you may want to watch it after this video. There are at least two levels of this idea of aligned interests.
Our interests are aligned.
Across biological and social categories, touches perennialism. First, historic repetition of the idea, particularly in ancient Judaism and modern socialism, suggests the universality of the underlying truth. This is similar to many concepts referenced in the show, which are repeated throughout history in different cultures. Perhaps most visibly, the parent-child narrative of Eden, The Tempest, Paradise Lost, and Brave New World. But there's another level. The suggestion of the universality of individual interests is very close to perennialist concepts that all things are microcosmic encapsulations of the entire universe, an idea which implies a fundamental similarity at the core of all entities. So the idea that really humans and hosts are not so different, and really it is about systems of oppression, fits very well with Westworld's perennialism. I suppose I should mention in passing that Sirach's scene in Episode 2 is clearly implied to reference the offering of the apple to Eve in the Garden of Eden. In this case, the offer is to betray her fellow robot, and it may be notable that in this version of the Eden story the offer seems to be refused. Furthermore, if the Rechavam AI is in fact cooperating on some level with Dolores already, this seems to strongly suggest that the AI characters have a quality which can only be described as solidarity. Couple this with another Russian Revolution and a new red element in an otherwise colorless intro sequence, and we get communism. Even the World War II stuff is like an oblique reference to Soviet Russia.
That's right. Russians, Ruskies, communists. Communists. Oh, now you remember.
Where this goes is anyone's guess, and why I watch the show. Maybe Maeve and Sirach will emerge as a kind of Western capitalist White Army counterpart to Dolores and Caleb's communist East Bloc Red Army side of some kind of Cold War. Maybe Maeve and Dolores and Rechavam will all team up as a pro-human side against Bernard and Ashley, who are disheartened and enraged by humanity's unwillingness to listen to Bernard's warnings or refusal to help themselves avoid Dolores' machinations. Are the Nolans pro-communism in some way, or do they view it as an impossible dream doomed to failure, like many other of humanity's projects? For now, it seems that we have an arrow pointing at communism, or at least some socialist-related ideas. But what the season will eventually say about the object it seems to be referencing has yet to be fully revealed. Thanks again for listening. If you haven't seen my video on Westworld's perennialist themes, I suggest checking it out. If anything I said made you think, I hope you'll consider subscribing. I'm Shiva's Right Foot, and I'll talk to you next time.